When I tested my code off camera, I noticed two problems. The first is that it didn't accept the file type P, but the second is that it then went on to say I chose none instead of repeating the question. Please check that you have P in your list of valid responses. Then I'd like you to see if you can loop the code so that if users put in something that's invalid, it asks the question again. Please pause this video and give it a go. To start your loop, begin with while true, followed by a colon. Then select all the code up to the end of the else statement and tap Tab to indent it. We can confirm that the code works for P, and if we do have an invalid file type, it complains, but it doesn't say we chose none, and of course it will exit on XXX. The next thing we need to do is add to our code so that if the user chooses I, we can check if they mean integer or image. If you'd like, feel free to pause this video and see if you can write that code for yourself. We can put this code either inside the function or outside where we call the function. I've decided to put this code outside the function. And there's what it looks like. Please remember to comment your code. We can then check if it's enter or if it isn't and set the file type accordingly. We can then follow our test pan and check if they say enter, it will say integer, and if they say anything else, it should say image. So now's a great time to commit your code with a sensible comment. The next thing on our list is to create an integer checking function. We're going to use a single function to check that users enter 0 or more for integers and 1 or more for the width and height of their image. What we're going to do is go back into our AP Basics folder and double-click on the number checker. We can then tap F5, call a component for integer checker, and change the directory so that it's in the bit calculator and not in our AP Basics folder. So by clicking those three dots, please make sure you choose the correct folder and then say OK. Rather than calling it numcheck, I'm wanting to refactor and change the name and call it intcheck for integer checker. We also need an additional parameter called low. I'm going to edit my error message to tell them to enter a number that is more than or equal to the low number. And I can also edit our if statement to check that the response is more than or equal to the low number we feed in. Our next step is to edit the code. Can you change it so that it checks that the width and height are 1 or more? To update your code, simply add "1" to both the width and height function calls. Next, you want to duplicate your width for loop and change it so that you can ask the user for an integer, remembering that the integer must be 0 or more. And here's what the code looks like. We're asking for an integer that needs to be 0 or more. And as soon as I started testing, I noticed a problem because it was accepting 0.5, which is a float. Did you spot the issue earlier where we should have changed integer to float? If you did, well done. If you didn't, please change it now. Once you've fixed the code, you can check it according to the test plan. When you run it, it will let you check for an integer. You can then switch over to the width and height test plan and continue to run the program because we've told it to ask for an integer, the width, and the height. As you can see, it works for width and it works for height as well, meaning that we've successfully completed this component.